Hello. I'm glad to be here today to share a story for the service, but first I have a question for you. I'm wondering if any of you who are watching today have ever been outside and taken a moment to watch the animals that you can see. Maybe you've seen a bird flying by or a squirrel running along, maybe you've seen a beetle skittering by, and I wonder if you have ever wondered, why do they do what they do? What is it that they're doing? Now, all of the creatures have an important job to do, but it's not always easy to see or understand exactly what it is. And so I have a story to share with you today that's adapted from one by Deborah Friedman called Carl and the Meaning of Life. Now, Carl was a creature. Carl was not a bird. Carl was not a bear or a fox. Carl was an earthworm. Have you ever seen an earthworm? Now, Carl spent most of his time underground, burrowing and tunneling, and crunching and munching dried leaves and digesting them and casting and tunneling some more and turning hard dirt into fluffy soil. He spent hours upon hours and days and weeks doing that. Now, one day, though, he was near the surface and he came up and took a look around, and he saw nearby there was a field mouse who was planting some seeds. And the field mouse had noticed Carl and turned to him and said, Why do you do what you do? And Carl looked at the field mouse and said, Well, I don't know. Why do I do what I do? I think Carl might be having a little bit of an existential crisis here. Carl had never thought about that before. He just did what he did. But the field mouse was waiting for an answer, and so he said, Oh, I'll be right back. I'm going to go find out. And he hurried away and stopped making fluffy soil. Instead, he went out to find the answer to the field mouse's question. And before long, he came upon a rabbit. And he asked the rabbit, Excuse me, can you tell me, why do I do what I do? And the rabbit said, Oh, dear me. I don't know why you do what you do, but I do what I do for my babies. And Carl looked around at all the little rabbit babies hopping around. But Carl didn't have any babies. Then a fox appeared. And Carl asked the fox, Hello, can you tell me, why do I do what I do? Who do I do it for? And the fox replied, For whom? And in any case, I don't have time to answer questions. I am here for the hunt. But Carl did not want to hunt. Then he heard another voice, and he looked around, and it was a squirrel. And the squirrel said, Why are you talking to a fox? And Carl said, Oh, I'm trying to find an answer to the question that the field mouse asked me. I really need to know, why do I do what I do? And the squirrel said, Oh, well, I certainly don't know, but you know what I do? I plant trees. Trees are where I sleep. But Carl could not sleep. Carl could not sleep, certainly not in trees like a squirrel, and not at all as long as he didn't have the answer to the field mouse's question. He needed to know. And so he kept on searching. And he traveled on and asked every creature he found. Weeks turned into months, and still he asked and didn't find anybody who knew the answer to his question. But after a while, the earth began to become barren and dry. The plants dried up. And pretty soon, the birds flew away to find other spaces with more green and more leaves. And the bears trundled off to look for berries. And pretty soon, Carl was all by himself. But what about me? He called. And then he thought, I am never going to get an answer to my question. And he began to sniffle. But then he heard an answering, echoing sniffle, followed by a little squeak, and he looked over, and there he saw the saddest little ground beetle he had ever seen. And the beetle said, I can't find any grubs. And Carl said, "Oh, well, wait just a minute." And Carl went and looked under a rock. No grubs. Then Carl poked at the ground, and it was hard as a rock. The dirt was so hard. And he thought, "Where is my fluffy soil?" And then he knew what he needed to do. And he told the beetle, "I'll be right back." And what do you think he did? He began to burrow and tunnel under the ground. He began to crunch and munch the dead leaves, digest them, and cast and continue tunneling until after a while he began to turn the soil nice and fluffy again, and it became rich soil. And pretty soon the plants began to grow again, and the creatures began to come back. The field mouse he saw again one day, and the field mouse said, "You made my plants grow." And ever after that, when somebody wondered, "Why do I do what I do?" the creatures suggested that maybe they should go and talk to Carl. That is our story for today. I'm so glad to have shared it with you. Thank you for joining me. It's good to gather together in this way. Take care.